This has been a long time coming. I've been thinking about how Pikmin 4 should be for more than 3 years at this point. Pikmin is not the biggest of Nintendo's franchises, but it's one that is loved by many. Over the course of 20 years, we have had 3 games, re-releases of these games, a spin-off, and a mobile game released last fall. Right now, fans are waiting for Pikmin 4, which is yet to be announced, though Shigeru Miyamoto has stated in interviews that the game is being worked on. I think now is as good a time as any to finally share my ideas for Pikmin 4. New additions, new mechanics, story, and so on. Welcome to Conceptualizing Pikmin 4. Let's start by talking about new Pikmin types. This is probably the most discussed topic around Pikmin 4, and for good reason. We know there are a lot of Pikmin types we haven't seen based on the good ending in Pikmin 1. I would assume that we will get 2 new Pikmin types because that's what we got in Pikmin 2 and 3, if we don't count the Bulbmin. I've seen many ideas for new Pikmin types on the internet, and I've come up with 2 of my own. I want to make this clear, but I'm trying to think of these Pikmin like a game designer would when creating a new Pikmin type. Now, I don't make games for a living, but I have tried programming and it's not that easy. When creating a new Pikmin type, one needs to consider how the Pikmin in previous games operate and understand how their abilities work. Many of the ideas for new Pikmin I've seen involve overpowered Pikmin or Pikmin with abilities which I think would be hard to program into the game. This is something to keep in mind if you're creating a Pikmin you want to see in the next game. Now that I got that out of the way, let me introduce you to Wood Pikmin. I think I'm not the only one who wants a plant-based Pikmin type, one which is more plant than animal, like Bulbasaur is. The idea I have for Wood Pikmin is that they are shaped like logs with a stem growing out of the top. Since its body is made of wood, it should be able to float on water without drowning. It can't carry any items while in the water, but I think it would be cool if you could walk into the water while holding onto a Wood Pikmin to stay afloat like a life ring. There may not be much point to this, but it would mean we have 3 stages of water travel: underwater, on the water, and above the water. Because the Wood Pikmin stay on the surface of the water, they can cross the water without worrying about how deep the water is. If the Wood Pikmin and the Blue Pikmin were to cross a sink full of water, the Wood Pikmin would be able to cross, but the Blue Pikmin would be stuck at the bottom of the sink. Wood Pikmin don't have much control in the water. If they get caught in a strong current, they'll get washed downstream. Of course, floating can't be the only thing these Pikmin do. I'm thinking they should be able to make plants grow by sharing nutrients, which I feel would be similar to how yellow Pikmin conduct electricity in the third game. I think it would work so that you throw Wood Pikmin at a plant, it'll settle down next to the plant, and after a short time the plant will be fully grown. I also think since trees take up nutrients from the dirt, there will be some dirt walls that only Wood Pikmin can tear down. Any Wood Pikmin that help tear down the wall will produce a small amount of nectar. Wood Pikmin will be extremely weak to fire, probably dying instantly or twice as fast as any other type does. They can't be completely immune to water either. I think if their whole body was submerged by water, they would eventually die of suffocation, but as long as their head is above the water, then they will be fine. Now that's all I got for Wood Pikmin. The other new type I've come up with is the Sound Pikmin. I think sound mechanics would work well with Pikmin, and having a Pikmin type which works around the mechanic would be cool. The sound Pikmin have antennae that emit and receive sound waves. I'm going for an insect-like design because I was thinking about crickets and thought that would work, which could be a good reason also to make them green. To explain how their sound abilities work, I first need to explain a new hazard I've come up with called darkness. Caves return in Pikmin 4, and this time are incredibly dark. Too dark for Pikmin to see anything in front of them. Pikmin moving through the dark are more likely to trip and get separated from the captain. You can't order Pikmin to charge at enemies, and the worst part is that Pikmin can't carry items back to the ship, as they have no sense of direction in the cave. This is where the sound Pikmin come in. Some Pikmin use echolocation to find their way in the dark, so none of this applies to them. There may be other situations where a Pikmin's vision is obscured, but the sound Pikmin will never be affected by it. When Pikmin are going to carry items, you need at least one sound Pikmin to help carry it, or else the Pikmin will just walk in circles. The sound Pikmin can lead other Pikmin to the exit, which is why you need them to carry items through the caves. The sound waves they emit act as a way for other Pikmin to find their way through the dark. Having sound Pikmin with you in caves will allow other Pikmin to charge at enemies since they just follow what the sound Pikmin are doing, and reduce the chances of other Pikmin being separated. Sound Pikmin constantly emit sound waves from their antennae, so they can wake up sleeping enemies if they get too close. I would also like it if sound Pikmin could break glass with high-pitched sounds, but since rock Pikmin already break glass, I may need to come up with something else. The one problem I have with sound Pikmin is that I don't have enough good ideas for them. It almost feels like I'm only adding the darkness hazard so they will be somewhat useful. If anyone can come up with a better idea for how they operate, please tell me, I want to know. Moving on from new Pikmin types, let's talk about the story. My idea for Pikmin 4 is that it's set about 40 years after the first game, where we take control of Captain Olimar's grandson, who is following in his footsteps by leading a research expedition to explore FNF 404. Yeah, that's all I come up with. The game should focus more on exploration and research. It would be cool if all the areas are interconnected, while also being bigger than areas from previous installments. One idea I have is that the game is so big that each area has more than one landing site. Different areas are reached via caves and paths that are opened as the game progresses. You will gain the ability to call the ship and the onion to the nearest landing site so that it's easier to carry items back to the ship. Some landing sites need to be cleared before you can use them, and you have a limit to how many times a day you can call your ship to a different landing site. It would be cool if there was a building mechanic in Pikmin 4 where you obtain different materials that can be used to make upgrades. This was something you could do in Pikmin 2 after obtaining certain treasures, and I would like to see it come back in this game. After you bring new materials back to the ship, you'll be told that the materials can be used to make new equipment, but you're required to find other materials as well in order to make it. One of the things you should be able to build is a robotic Pikmin drone. The Pikmin drone is a way to get to see things from the Pikmin's perspective. It can swap between ground mode and flight mode. In flight mode, the drone can survey an area from above so you can know the layout of the area ahead of time. In ground mode, it can lead a group of Pikmin to a point on the map, so if there is somewhere you need Pikmin, the drone can take them there. It would be contained in the ship and you can choose to send it out by going up to the ship and selecting the option to activate it. The drone should be able to take damage from enemies, which is something to keep in mind. If it takes too much damage, it will break and you can't use it. To fix the drone, you need to have your Pikmin take it back to the ship and wait a day for it to be repaired. Overall, I think a Pikmin drone would be a great addition that could add more depth to how you approach the game. I have also an idea for an artificial onion, an attempt to replicate the original onion, but nowhere near as good. This could be used to house purple and white Pikmin, since they don't seem to have their own onion. It can be used to produce purple and white Pikmin sprouts, but since it's still a prototype and artificial, regardless of what you feed the onion, it can only produce one sprout at a time. Aside from that, what if you could use the materials to craft upgrades for the ship, which is how you unlock new areas? Speaking of which, I would love to see a volcano setting in the game. The red Pikmin would be useful here considering they are immune to fire. In the volcano, non-reds die faster to fire, and if the wood Pikmin don't die instantly to fire under normal circumstances, they would do so in the volcano. I am unsure if the red Pikmin would be capable of swimming in lava. After all, lava is way hotter than any flame on a candle. This is something I don't feel I can decide. I'll leave it up to Nintendo. The boss of this area could be a giant magma creature, which you fight using the red Pikmin. The outside of the volcano could be a snowy mountain area, so on the outside it's cold and on the inside it's warm. I feel there could be some interesting ideas for how the player climbs the mountain, that involves you going in and out of the volcano. An ocean setting would be neat, one which has you explore underwater with blue Pikmin. I felt that in Pikmin 3, the blue Pikmin weren't that useful since they appeared so late in the game. You only really needed them to reach a boss and collect some fruits. Pikmin 4 needs to make them more useful, and having an area set underwater would do that. Since the Pikmin franchise is set on Earth in the distant future, we could see signs of pollution in this area like plastic trash in the water, or other signs of pollution. Perhaps there are islands in this area which you build bridges to reach, and there's a sandy beach or a desert nearby. I would imagine that the wood Pikmin are found in a huge forest with giant trees that you can't go inside of, with a river running through the center of the forest. Caves should go beneath the surface of most areas. There should be a huge underground network of caverns that connects the different areas. These areas are where the sound Pikmin are found, and I guess if the purple and white Pikmin are added to the game, they should also be found in the caves. Most parts underground don't have any light sources, so this is where the darkness hazard is. Like in Pikmin 2, the caves will be infested by hostile enemies, but also feature rare materials that you can't find anywhere else. Finally, I'd like to see an area from Pikmin 2 or 3 return, like the Garden of Hope or the Perplexing Pool. Moving on to gameplay, I would like there to be some new moves that you can do with Pikmin. Perhaps when you have a certain number of Pikmin of a single type with you, you can have them do special moves. The only things I can think of currently is having the wing Pikmin create a cyclone by spinning around rapidly, and having some Pikmin create a powerful high-pitched sound which stuns nearby enemies and shatters glass. Maybe the Pikmin are required to be flowered in order to do this, and they lose flower status after doing so. Either that or they have their attack and speed cut in half for a short amount of time. They should add a new spray to the game like the Ultra Spicy spray. I have come up with the Ultra Snaky spray, which is made from a special leaf, and when used, it cloaks the Pikmin so that nearby enemies don't notice them as they pass by. I think this could be used for stealth, so you can sneak past enemies you don't feel confident beating. It would last from about 2 to 3 minutes. The camera function should be expanded on from Pikmin 3. In that game, it was an optional feature used for taking pictures, but here I would like it to be used for all sorts of things. It can have a night vision mode to help you see in the dark caves, however this would only benefit the player, and the Pikmin still won't be able to see anything. You can use the camera to scan areas to see if there's anything hidden from the player, like a breakable wall or an item buried underground. It could be used as a way to detect sound waves like the echo visor in Metroid Prime 2. It could be especially useful if we have silent Pikmin. Of course, it would also work as a regular camera. You can use it to take pictures of different creatures, to analyze and learn more about how they behave. In addition, you can swap to drone camera mode to have the drone take pictures for you. Perhaps there could even be filter options like in Super Mario Odyssey. I don't think we should be able to play as 4 characters in this game, or at least not have 4 playable characters at the same time. Pikmin games have added 1 new playable character with each numbered entry. However, this should not be a trend with the games. I think if there are going to be 4 playable characters, they should all have different traits, and you can only use 2 of them at a time. Each time before you go down to the planet's surface, you can choose which characters you want to play as. I think the characters could have special abilities like faster movement, more health, increased throwing height, and stealth. These may not be the actual abilities that the characters have, I'm just throwing out some suggestions there for what their abilities could be. Pikmin 4 needs new game modes, and I think the obvious one is night mode. Since the first game, we have been forced to take off at sunset to avoid the nocturnal creatures that come out at night. But what if we wanted to challenge ourselves? Perhaps after you beat the game once, you unlock night mode, which allows you to play through the game again. But now, if you don't go back to the ship before sunset, you will take off with the onion and any Pikmin that were at the landing site, leaving you stranded on the planet for the night with only the Pikmin you had with you as the ship took off. At night, more hostile creatures are up and about, some of which are exclusive to the night, and some of which don't normally show up in the area that you're in. It could be challenging, but rewarding. There could be materials that you only find at night, and the Ultra Snaky Spray could be useful here to hide from enemies. Ultra Spicy Mode, achievements, and multiplayer needs to return from Pikmin 3 Deluxe. Those features encourage replaying the game and trying new things. I would also like to see new challenge modes that spice up the game. What if you had a limited onion mode where you play through the main story, but the onion has limited storage capacity? Regardless of what game modes are added, I want all the ones from Pikmin 3 to return, and the challenge mode from Pikmin 1. And that's about all I got. Now that I've shared my ideas, I guess all I can do is wait for the actual game to be revealed. There's no telling if any of these concepts will become a reality, but I'm hoping that at least some of them are things that could happen. Not saying that any of my ideas will, but it's fun to speculate about what's going to happen. So what do you think of my ideas? Is there something you want to Pikmin for? Please share your thoughts in the comments. That's all from me. See you later.